Good evening. This is Real Talk, History as a Weapon for Black Liberation, and I'm your host, Sundiata Keita Chajua. We have today a very important guest, Dr. Rose Brewer. Dr. Brewer is a PhD and is the Morse Alumni Distinguished Teaching Professor and past chairperson of the Department of African and African American Studies at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. She is also the president of the Society for the Study of Social Problems. She received her MA and PhD degrees in sociology from Indiana University and did postdoctoral studies at the University of Chicago. A social activist and scholar, Brewer publishes extensively on Black feminism, political economy, and social movements, race, class, gender, and social change. She is one of the authors of the award winning The Color of Wealth, a number of co edited volumes, including the U.S. Social Forum, Perspectives of a Movement, Bridges of Power, Women's Multicultural Alliances, and Is Academic Feminism Dead? She most recently co edited Rod Bush, Lessons from a Radical Black Scholar on Liberation, Love, and Justice. Rose, let me bring you on.
Okay.
Ah, boy, it has been a real struggle getting us together.
I can't explain it, but I'm here now, and you're
That's right.
here, so that's the main thing.
So on Real Talk, we are very informal. So I try and after introductions, we dispense with doctors and all of that, and we become our first names and brothers and sisters. Now, I always begin with biographical questions because I want our audience to get a sense of who you are as a person, because that helps them understand your contemporary politics and scholarship, right? If they have an idea how you became you. So I use Bill Cross's Negrescence theory,
Mm-hmm.
identity development. Bill and I were good friends, and I always thought that he really did lay out a model that explained the ways in which we became politically conscious. So now, Bill, he died last December 6th. He had come to visit Helen and I, and he contracted some kind of viral infection. And when he went back home to Denver, he ended up having to be put in a nursing home. And then shortly thereafter, he made the decision not to go through the kind of treatment they prescribed, and he let himself transition. So I always want to start with a moment of silence in honor of Bill. Yes. So my first question to you, Rose, is where were you born? And what historical period did you come of age? And what were the kind of, and what was the class background of your family? And I also want to know if your family was an activist family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. My background had a profound and continues to have a profound impact on my political development. I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Ah,
And I know some of your listeners know that history.
Mhm.
I grew up in the 50s, late 50s and into the 60s, and came of age by the time the Black Power movement was kicking in. But those seeds had been planted. I like to draw up on the Black radical tradition, saying that, I didn't make the history that I necessarily would have chosen, but it shaped me profoundly. The racial apartheid in Tulsa persisted for decades, and as a matter of fact, continues into the current moment. We could have a whole nother discussion
Mhm.
on how that history is talked about and how it has to be interrogated. But I had profound teachers, and politically, my family, traditional Black, I would say members of the lower working class. We didn't have much money, but my father was a very hard worker, often working two or three jobs. Um, and the trilogy of family, community, and church,
Mhm.
that was the thing that really moved us. And I was fortunate enough to live very close to my grandparents. And that was also a very profound impact. Actually, my grandmother was licensed practical nurse, which during that period was really quite unusual for a Black woman because the hospital that she had to practice in, going back to the racial apartheid piece, was Moton Hospital. And I know you know the name of Moton. Uh,
Mhm.
and so Black schools, that was Oklahoma when I was growing up, and then that particular experience converging with the explosion that became the Black Power movement really began to be much more politically aware during the period when Black students were making demands on their campuses. I attended a, a small state college called Northeastern State College. And we, as people all over the country, maybe remember students were saying, you got to change.
Mhm.
And we made the typical demands: more
Right,
courses,
right.
faculty, students. You wouldn't expect that in a small Oklahoma state college, but it happened. And then I could say, I guess you could say with those seeds planted from the Tulsa experience into, as you all know, Sundiata, coming of age in a particular political moment can have a tremendous impact on you. And having coming of age during a period when the revolution had come, or so we thought,
Mhm.
shaped me really profoundly. And the radicalization of that, the multiple, I would say, incarnations of my growth um, into the current moment, frankly speaking.
No, there's parts of your biography that intersect with mine. My mother was one of I guess she was part of the second cohort of Black women to become nurses. So she became an
Mhm.
LPN in, I think, 52. And and those experiences now in Decatur, Illinois, we didn't have a large enough Black population to have a full set of institutions like a hospital. So she worked in a Catholic hospital.
Mm, mm.
The stories. I was, very, very young, but I listened. And the stories she would tell about white people screaming, spitting, hitting her, as she attempted to do her job of taking care of them. Those things, they shape you. They have profound impact, as you said. So you're a sociologist by training.
Right.
But you also have been in Black Africana studies, and given the generation, we're pretty close in age, I suspect. That the Black Africana Studies part is self education,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, so, as a young person, what attracted you to sociology?
I think it's the same thing that going back to the political shaping, trying to understand the prototypical question of why Black people were on the bottom. I
Mhm.
mean,
Yeah,
it just actually, I was a double major. I was a history major, which I know you can relate to,
yeah.
as well as a sociology major as an undergraduate, and debated whether or not I was going, if I went to graduate school, going the history route or the sociology route. And at the time, and I often reflect on this, I can't say that it was 100% the right trajectory, but it seemed to me that sociology was asking some of the systemic questions that
Mm,
I wanted to see answered. That whole question of stratification, inequality, who's on the bottom, who's not. Although, as you well know, the way sociology was being taught when I was studying for my doctorate, we can take the whole thing apart.
yeah, yeah. Well, in fact, I would say that's what your generation of Black sociologists would, in fact, do is take
Right.
it apart.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. But it did provide, I think, a foundation. This is something I struggle with my students today with thinking systemically, thinking structurally. They have a hard time with the structural piece.
Yes, they
Although
do.
I don't wanna over generalize because as you well know, some of them are sharp as all get out and get what we're dealing with in this society just sharply and precisely. But I would say a disproportionate number of them, it's difficult because that kind of critical thought, I haven't really tracked what's going on in K through 12 except, what we know is going on.
Hmm.
But that's not a strong suit for the way young people are being, processed in a lot of ways. And I'm assuming it's going to get worse given the attack that we're under.
No, no, I think you're absolutely right that the number of critical thinkers and just inquisitiveness is a much smaller subset of this generation. And actually, I'd say going back into the 90s.
Yeah,
Um,
it's been a minute. It's been a while.
yeah, yeah, it's
Exactly.
definitely been a while. Uh, and, like you, I struggle to get students to think systemically and to think systematically.
Exactly. Exactly.
That goes against not just the educational process, but the socialization process in this society. The sense of hyper individualism. Just on a kind of, I remain very disturbed. I think that our music tells us something about our state of consciousness and how we see the world and what we're willing to do. And so I've been very disturbed by the fact that we don't have groups.
It's
It's,
been a while. That's been another minute.
yeah, it's been a minute, and I think that profoundly tells us about the the move away from an an African retention of a communal ethos, and I think that we are very much becoming much more like the people who oppress us. But we could go on and on.
Yeah, well, we know you're right in that regard, and of course, dealing with a political economic system that very systematically separates out the communal from the profit.
Yes.
A lot of it is advanced by the profit motive, and that's just one tier of so many issues that have attacked and undermined some of our strengths as a people.
Absolutely. So, can you talk about the ways in which sociology, and I'm going to put you in the critical sociology camp.
I'll take that.
Yeah, I figured you would. And how that intersects with a Black studies that's more informed by class and gender than probably the mainstream of Black
Mm-hmm.
studies is today,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
can you talk about the intersection and how you get those two things to work uh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, in harmony?
Yeah, I think I hear your question. This is also an aspect of our field, because I know you are also a scholar of Black Studies. Um, that there certainly are, I would say, there are tendencies within the field, meaning that the critical turn, especially around race, class, and gender, um, converges with, I think, a younger generation of thinkers, and this frame coming out of the '80s, basically,
Yeah,
um, has shaped the faculty that we're hiring. We just hired, I think maybe two Black women scholars whose own research has been much informed by the race, class, gender dynamic. And we also have recently hired two what I would call critical scholars, using the term that you use. I wouldn't say they were Marxists in the traditional sense of that word, but follow a particular kind of Black radical tradition. I wouldn't even say that there's Cedric Robinson in particular, but some kind of convergence that's going on. Maybe a Fred Moten kind of orientation.
mm.
I'm not 100% sure. Yeah,
Well, I'm not sure how I
but
feel about that,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
but
So
but
it is I would say, symbiosis that has found its way into the field. It's very, very distinctive from when we were trying to get, Black studies off the ground. And
right, right.
um, so, I mean, it's to be expected. What is life but change?
That's right.
But I do think it reflects something that we were talking about earlier, that there is a generational shift that has happened. Now, the question is, where the field or the discipline will be a decade or so from now. I'm not 100% sure. I did see how just recently that there are two more PhD programs that have been established, and I can't
Mhm.
remember the names of them, but they just you might be aware that that has happened. So folk are being trained to be faculty and scholars
That's right.
in the context of, does Illinois have a PhD program?
No,
Okay.
we prepared a PhD proposal, and then there emerged as the chancellor who was supportive was removed.
Mm,
And
mm.
let's say that it never gained traction after that. There
You know,
was there was an effort to create an ethnic studies PhD, and I will admit that I vigorously and used every
mm-hmm.
possibility and leverage that I had to oppose it. Yeah,
Yeah. I think that that is a tendency. Actually, thinking of the two programs that I mentioned, one was not Africana Studies as sovereign and self-determining,
yeah,
but it was ethnic race and that kind of program. And I'm blocking on where those two they just came into existence. Um, your story sounds similar to Minnesota. We have a graduate minor and get plenty
Yeah.
of students who want to do a PhD. We developed a proposal for that, and then neoliberalism kicked in,
Hmm.
and supposedly no money. So I'm wondering how some universities find resources and others don't. So,
Yeah. Yeah. We all know the story. You know,
yeah,
the interesting thing about Illinois is that every year they build a couple of buildings. It's amazing. But let's get out of the weeds of this
and
thing.
get into something. Okay,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah. So it's been, I think, more than 20 years since you and your colleagues published The Color of Wealth.
right.
We're behind the racial wealth divide.
That's right.
And I kind of want you to reminisce, but also do some updating. So,
Sure.
first, can you briefly outline the main premises and findings of that work? Then I want you to respond to the question, how has the concentration of wealth and or the color of wealth changed over the last 20 years?
Hmm. You know, that particular volume was a collection of scholars as well as activists. One of the authors, Meiju Louis, was very involved with labor organizing, and so we were trying to produce a volume that tapped into the not only the scholarly tradition, but also what people were doing on the ground.
Mhm.
And so the authors represented that collection of folk. And at that time, I was involved with an organization in Boston called United for a Fair Economy, and they
Yes.
had done extensive work on wealth, but they hadn't, surprise, surprise, looked at it through a lens of phrase. One would think, you're talking about the wealth concentration, and you miss the most profound reason, and that is, and who produced it,
Mhm. Yeah.
and
It's funny how that happens, Rose.
how the country became filthy rich on the backs of these people. But anyway, that was kind of the impetus to really extend the way the organization had thought about uh, the concentration of wealth, to bring into the analysis the underpinnings. And a lot of it dealt with, of course, not only the structural and historical reasons for this, but a lot of it focused in on the policy decisions. This
Mhm.
is now, since that book was written, become pretty normative. People know now that the New Deal only covered some people.
That's
Uh,
right.
yeah, that Social Security did not was not available to Black farmers and domestic workers. So when we were saying that back then, it was a little bit novel, but
Mhm.
everybody comes from that premise now. Um,
But
and so
I
we
think it is important to point out that when you say black farmers and domestic workers,
right.
that you mean 60% of black workers didn't
That's
was not
right. I
eligible
mean,
for
we
Social
might as
Security.
well, when you get to
Yeah.
talking about getting to the weeds, the numbers are probably larger than that. That, to tell the truth, right?
Yeah, that's true because as they say, the official figures are always white
They're
low.
always distorted.
That's right.
Yeah. Uh, so yeah, that's kind of the context for the evolution of that. But the second part of your question has to do with the now, and I know you probably have a lot of insight on where we are. There was a study, I would say 4 or 5 years ago, got a little bit of attention in the media saying that if the situation unfolded the way it is now, that by the year 2021, Black African people would be at zero wealth. Well, I think we're sort of ahead of the curve in terms of given what happened in 2008 with that aggressive housing uh, situation where
Mhm.
many uh, Black folk lost whatever little equity they had, and we can get into whether or not housing is a way to build it. Uh, but the point is, the last I would what we're now 20 no 17 years since 2008.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and of course that happened in the context of the Obama administration, where the banks and Goldman Sachs were bailed out, and the people who were put into these subprime mortgages lost. So, I mean, that explains why by by 2021 the situation would be that dire. But now, it's been we're in a moment of such tremendous right-wing attack that
Absolutely.
we probably have to even rethink, forget about the wealth, just our
Yeah.
survival.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember seeing something a few years ago that suggested that it would be 9.5 generations, meaning that if everything stayed the same, and I think the data came out in 2020, that if there was no further dipping and if there was not an acceleration, right, of progress, if things stayed roughly the same, it would
Right.
take 9.5 generations for Black people to reach economic parity. And
Yeah,
what
I've
we
seen that.
know is
Yeah,
that
I've seen
things
that
haven't
that
stayed the
statistic
same;
too.
they've gotten worse.
Right, right, right,
Right?
right, right. Well, I mean, we can get into some of the particulars of the way this, racial capitalist system
Yeah.
operates, but it certainly has everything to do with that, as well as which is also probably another show, what happens when you're in the midst of an empire that's on its heels
Yes.
and has gone absolutely, what do they call it, bat shit
Shit.
crazy.
Crazy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Declining empire. Uh,
Right, right.
no, no doubt. So I want to go from here's where I'm a little bit critical, so you can push back at me. But
I will.
I know that political economists William Darity and Derek
Mhm.
Hamilton, they
Mhm.
primarily see, and I think largely the Black public, sees reparations as a means to close the racial wealth gap. Do you share that interpretation? Because I don't.
Yeah, I think it is quite a bit more complicated than that. Uh, Simply because, let's say it is a check. I don't know what it would be. But even if it's that, the way the system is set up and the way money is propagated and profits are propagated, it's just not going to resolve that. It's not going to resolve that gap that we talked about,
That's
that you're talking about. And I'm one for using language that we've got to have a very dramatically different kind of social order. Uh,
right.
that doesn't mean that I don't think that, back to the earlier point, that who built this country in terms of, we'll just use cotton, making it, and Europe, the richest entities on earth. You just can't forget that from my perspective. So You need both those things. There has to be some kind of from my perspective, some kind of way of, even before we get into something, I'll just say socialism, that you're
Mhm.
not going to jump from here to there without some kind of reckoning.
That's
And so I'm trying to do both those things. Get out of this order, but understand you're just not going to jump from here to there without coming to grips with the racial order that has so um, has so been at the foundation and the essence of the system. It's a class system, but it
right.
foundationally and very dramatically back to that interplay between the two. And you've got to come to grips with with simultaneously both those things.
I thought King, you know, acknowledging the limitations of democratic socialism, but I thought
Mhm.
the King's argument, which was made way back in '64,
Oh, he
that
was on it.
oh yeah, yeah, no, 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 uh, you know, they've done a masterful job in shrinking King, right? And really helping people to misunderstand the revolutionary character of King from 65 forward, right? So King makes the argument that there should be a big class readjustment. He's talking about guaranteed
Yeah,
income
yeah, yeah,
and all
yeah,
of
yeah.
that. And then he
Right.
says that there should also be within that, in addition to that, he says there should be a special compensation for the Negro.
Well, I mean, that's what we were saying,
Yeah. No,
right?
no. I mean, he's saying both that you got to do a
Yeah,
big
no,
thing
that's what
with
I'm saying.
black,
You got
and
a
you got to do an
simultaneity of those
additional
two things,
thing for
right?
black
Right.
folk, right?
Right. Right.
And I think that that's something that our white socialists have a difficult time with.
Well, not only our white socialists, some of our black socialists have
Yeah,
difficult
that
time
is
with that
true
too.
too. That is
Yeah,
true too. Yeah.
but I mean, I think you look at the African continent and what people are doing who are struggling for sovereignty and for self-determination. Uh, Understand that you got to pay something for all this pain that that you
Hmm.
caused. You just can't. We can't hop over that.
No, you can't. You know, I mean, just fundamentally, it's amazing that people think that you can just erase the 100+ million that was
No.
killed as a consequence of the slave trade. That you can
Mm-mm.
just erase the
Mm-mm.
fact that our labor built this society, right? 75% of all U.S. exports was produced by enslaved Africans. So,
And then our very bodies,
yeah,
which were wealth in and of themselves.
in our mind and culture.
Exactly.
Yeah, no,
Exactly.
so no, no,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I do hear you. I think the good thing about having conversations like this and programs like this is I hope it, opens up people's consciousness a little bit more about how we think through some vexing and often complicated questions around, how do we resolve the deeply rooted injustices that we've experienced as a people. Not everybody's going to come from the same place, but there has to be some some careful thought about what it will take. And well, I'll just leave it at that.
you know, uh, this is, I think this is a good point to transition to Rod Bush. I didn't know the brother very well, but I know that you did.
Uh-huh.
And, interesting. I read Rod when I was probably in my 20s.
Okay.
Um, there was this socialist organization with Marlene Dixon that he was a part of, and they had this journal. I can't remember the journal now, but it was coming out in the late 70s and 80s, right?
Right.
Right. And so Rod was the epitome of a radical black scholar activist.
Absolutely.
He transitioned about 12 years ago, and he's become an influential figure among a certain type of black radical, and presumably radicals of color and white radical
Right.
activists.
Right.
Um, but he never achieved the kind of fame of these public intellectuals. And I really do want to distinguish public intellectuals from radical black scholar activists, right? Public intellectuals are commentators. Scholar activists produce engaged leaders, scholarship, but they're also working in their
They're
community.
on the ground,
They're on the ground.
on the
Yeah,
ground,
that's the
doing the
point.
work.
They're on the ground
Exactly.
doing work in the interest of the community.
That's right.
So, can you talk about Rod, his significance as a theorist, activist, and scholar, and why it would be important at this moment to revisit Rod's work?
Check mark all of those. Scholar, radical activist, I would say teacher par excellence. Um, if you look at some of the testimony, we gathered a little bit of that testimony in the volume, in that edited volume. I don't know when the man slept, but he mentored. We can talk about mentor, but you're
Yeah.
talking about someone who's willing to read, to sit with you, to check all of those boxes. So he had all of that going on. Um, you know, he understood, I think, the colonial world better. He understood imperialism
Mm-hmm.
better than a lot. And he was putting that out there when, back to your public intellectuals, dare not touch it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think a lot of that had to do with, back to your point around in the mix on the ground, coming of age during a particular period. And I'm not surprised. Back to our point around, we don't have the groups that we used to have that produce the music. We're in another unfortunate space where the so-called public intellectual, this is, from my perspective, much more, what's the word I want to use? It's the celebrity
Yes.
moment.
Yes. Yes.
And that was not what Rod was about.
That's right.
It's not how often you can get invited to pontificate, and pontification in a vacuum is not
Mhm.
going to do us any good anyway. So that's one reason, he didn't have nearly as much visibility. But for the people who knew him and valued him, his students, his family for sure, his colleagues and comrades, I would put myself into that category, understood his, real thoughtfulness, understanding the global nature of white world supremacy.
Mhm. Mhm.
And is that not what we're dealing with right now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you miss that point, you missed a lot.
We don't know what's happening. I
Yeah.
mean, we can talk about a declining empire, but you know the other features of it.
As they say,
So,
when
right.
in decline, they become more vicious.
Then that's exactly what we're experiencing. You know, that's exactly what. So, as I said, check all those marks. It can explain why, he may not be as well known as others. But I do think, as you were saying, in a certain circle of people, people are rereading his work.
Can you
And
point
yeah,
to some of the work that people should go look up in terms of?
yeah, White World Supremacy book, I think, is a key text. There are a number of articles. The old trick. Go to the reference list, and you can
Hmm.
see all of the listings of the articles that he wrote. Uh, he cited some of that stuff. His partner Melanie Bush. They have several books that they did together, and I would say one way to find those would be to go to her website, Melanie
Okay.
Bush, because she has it listed. And yeah, I can think of
We
a
are
couple
not
of
what we
others.
seem.
We are not what we seem.
That
Exactly.
was an
That's the
important
one.
book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the one that I was thinking. So those two,
Yeah.
I think those are the critical ones. Right.
Good. Good. So now you live in Minneapolis, and you've been at the University of Minneapolis,
Minnesota,
Minnesota,
Minnesota, right.
in the
So
Twin
that
Cities for
University
a
of Minneapolis,
long time. Back
I've
in
been
the
there
BRC
over,
days, you were there
yeah,
and have
no,
been there a minute, right?
I've been there over 30 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Minneapolis was ground zero for the international response to the murder of George Floyd.
Right.
So now, did the struggle after the murder of George Floyd yield any tangible and lasting transformations in policing in Minneapolis and St. Paul? And was there other quality of life areas such as employment, education, healthcare, etc., that improved dramatically for Black folk?
Now I know you already know the answer to
I
that.
do, but
Is this rhetorical? Yeah. And so not only Minneapolis, ground zero definitely was Minneapolis. St. Paul was in on it just a bit. But this was a global phenomenon.
yes.
There are people all over the world. One of the things I know it did change, whether the powers that be want to express it or not, is this whole piece about the role of the police. Now,
Hmm.
that was put out there. You can't take that back. I don't care why they try to take it back or how they try to take it back. And, you can quibble over whether defund was the right approach or whatever. But also raise the issue, which is something I think that the Panthers face, that some of the things that they proposed, this whole bail piece, there's cities
Hmm.
around the country that have taken, the bail thing away. That was one of
Well,
the pieces.
the state of Illinois has gotten rid of bail.
See, well, that's you might not think it's everything, but this logic has shifted in
Oh,
in
yeah.
many ways. But your fundamental questions around the Twin Cities and what has shifted, sad to say, liberals have a hard time shifting because they think they're doing something already, and they're not. And we're part of this quote Midwest. And actually, I'm a part of a collective. You probably know Terry Ann Williams, some and her Black Midwest West Project.
Hmm. Yeah.
But it is, we know what the South looks like to some extent. We have a sense of the East and the West, but there's a lot, and I know you've done your own due diligence in terms of your books and writing about it. But it is a peculiar and understudied and not well understood aspect, a very powerful aspect of what has cohered this country, but we don't have a good sense of how that has happened. But back to your point, not much, not much has changed. Yeah. uh,
But you guys do have a group of progressive and maybe even some radical folks that you've put in higher public office.
Yeah, speaking of which, there's a young Somali politician who's running for the mayor of the city of Minneapolis, Democratic Socialist.
Hmm.
They've been coming after him. You talking about Islamophobia? You talking about racism? You talking about red baiting? This is liberal
Oh yeah.
Minnesota.
Remember now, once you put pressure on liberals,
You scratch them and you see what's really there, right?
like conservatives. So can
You
you
got
give
it, and that's exactly what you're saying.
can you give the
Same
individual's
thing.
name?
Yeah, I beg your pardon.
The person that's running for mayor, the young community.
Omar Fatah.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, and check this out. The existing mayor, who is also, and we could talk about his role in the George Floyd situation, just approved a police trainer who wasn't a part of the George Floyd death, but who killed another young black man, and they have just appointed him as a police trainer, and that has, of course, people are up in arms about it. But what does that tell you? I mean,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. But
Yeah.
anyway, and kind of circling back to the to the young man who's running for mayor, the existing mayor, because Omar got the this is a uh Democratic Labor Farmer Party
Right.
here.
Right.
Yeah. He got that endorsement, and the existing mayor is having a hissy fit. They're trying to discredit the process, uh saying that it was poorly run and gonna try to challenge. Go away, get
Yeah.
out of here.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, it's pathetic, really, to tell the truth.
No.
So,
Yeah. It. But
yeah,
so
this is another way to try to
there are
knock
changes,
him.
but I don't think that people have really been focused on pointing out the ways in which that upsurge did force the system to make modifications.
No, it did. No doubt.
That,
I mean,
we know that there was a revanchist white lash, right,
exactly. That we're
immediately.
still living in. We're in the
That we're,
middle of it.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
that's in fact deepening, but
Right.
there were some advances. And I think
Absolutely.
it's always important for us to talk about and find ways to deepen the incursions that we make that better position us to fight. And again, like
Yeah,
I
we just mentioned Money Mail, but the whole narrative around, not that we ever believed that the police was our friend,
right,
but a whole lot of other people, their consciousness was raised
that's
around
right,
this. Now, the narrative may not be enough, but it matters. And now you got this, they're trying to recapture the narrative. I don't think they're going to be able to recapture that narrative because the behavior is such that the actions and the theory don't converge, you know. So, that can be said, and depending on what city you're looking at, uh, and I can't go, point by point. But as you well know, the terrain has shifted somewhat.
no,
And
absolutely,
we're working on a slightly different terrain. Not that that means that that moment was captured in a way that if we had our stuff together, it might have been. But it wasn't, in terms of I think about all of the young people who are out in the street here, and where are they? What
yeah,
what community and organizational connection might they have? Can you imagine those tens of thousands who, in fact, were politicized to some extent, but where to take it? Where would that go? The infrastructure for that just was not in place. So, it's kind of the
yeah,
difference between mobilization and being
that's
organized, you know.
and absolutely, that was a moment of mobilization. But those
Mhm.
upsurges, there are always going to be the few who find their way. to
And
sustain
that's what we have. We
innovation.
have,
And that's what we
I know you work with young people, but one of the things that keeps me going is that I know in terms of theory and practice that that layer is not going back, that there
yeah,
is a segment
that's right.
of the Black African struggle. They're in it, and I'd say beware. Now the numbers might not be where they should be, but we got some brilliant young people who get a lot of what we have to contend with. Um, so yeah, that gives me some hope. You know.
You know, theoretically, I don't know where you stand on those two big theories in terms of how you get a social movement. And so let me say this caveat: I think it's far
Okay,
more important to have organizations that sustain themselves over time because movements are always going to come and go.
absolutely,
And the point
absolutely,
is that you have to have the strong organizations that when the incident that sparks the movement,
absolutely.
you can guide it, right? Move it. But one theory argues that that movements grow when there is repression. The other theory is that movements grow with as things improve and people begin to have great
Yeah,
hope.
that was
Then
one of
they
the
see
theories
it
I
cut,
learned in
cut
sociology.
down. Yeah, those two broad theories, and it
Right.
does seem to me that there that the revanchist character of this moment is in
Hmm.
response to what we would have to say were minor changes, right? But a
Rattle the
level of
system.
change that these
Right.
people can't, they can't take it.
No, I mean, there's no doubt that the rattling of the system, and of course, as you know, Professor, this revanchist moment goes back at least 50 years. They've been, every time we've risen up, um, somebody's been planning and scheming. Uh, and what I know about the right in this country, of course, they have the resources, but that ideology, I mean, it's baked into the US. And those moments when it expresses itself so publicly as it is now, um, in some ways we shouldn't be surprised, but it is a different moment, a very deadly moment to tell the truth.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I would say that not since Reagan has the true character
Been so
of the U.S.
exposed.
ruling class been so that a lot of the things that they've done to mask and confuse,
Mhm.
um, fog has been dissipated.
Mhm. Mhm.
And they themselves have helped to dissipate it
Mhm.
because so what was that also? I can see clearly now.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, for real. For real. Uh, yeah, and especially, as we're experiencing a genocide in real time,
That's right.
you know.
So I want to talk a bit more about this moment and the Trump MAGA moment, the fascists,
Okay.
and there is a lot of discussion in the African American community in terms of how do we respond to the indiscriminate and brutal, cruel rounding up of largely because they're the majority Latin
Mhm. Mhm.
immigrant,
Mhm.
but let us not act like Haitians, right? And
Well,
the
not only
black populations,
Haitians,
including Afro
Somali,
Mexicans and Somali. Yeah,
Eritrean.
yeah, yeah. Let's not act like they're not being rounded up. But there's a lot of the circles I run in. There's a lot of discussion that one of it is what's the saying? They didn't effed around and found out. because of,
Yeah, I've heard that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a interesting dilemma, right? On the one hand, we must strive for solidarity with the most radical sectors of every population. But on the other hand, it is interesting that politically, since a large sector of the Latin immigrant,
Hmm.
maybe even the Chicano population, meaning those people who became part of the U.S. empire through the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo
Right, Hidalgo.
when they stole northern Mexico. Um, those folk, politically, about 50% of them, they consciously see themselves as white, and they vote in a way that is detrimental to African Americans in the cities that we share. Right? Um, so there's a lot of anger toward those folks, and even a lot of anger toward a sector of the Islamic community in terms of. So the question is, how do we navigate that, seek solidarity, but be very, very clear that these white Cubans, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans mean us as much harm as these regular old white folk?
Well, I would say this, you know, race is such a vexed category in in this country. It's confused
Yeah.
as well as distorted most of the back to your point around Professor Cross, most of the identities of pretty much the globe. When you see a South Asian who is blacker than I am
Hmm.
and sees themselves as white, there is some confusion that is going on. So, you know, um, Sundiata, I think we've got to be smarter than that. I think we have to really know who the enemy is, and that we live in, you know, black folk are still the most quote liberal or most progressive, but
Yeah.
we have contradictions within
Oh,
our
absolutely.
own.
Increasing
So
contradictions.
yeah, and understanding back to being able to think about this not solely structurally or systemically, uh, but that's a big piece of how to make sense out of this very contradictory moment from my perspective. I mean, when you say they're learning, well, good, but I think we've got to go deeper than that. We've got to really think about, and and in my own political work, as you were saying, there is a segment of the population that is a liable. They can be good
Right.
allies, and we need to try to
Absolutely.
peel off as many of them as we can. But this whole internal business of who's culpable, uh, you know, I think we know who. I hope we know who the real enemy is.
Yeah. You know, I think that there's some real confusion out there on that question.
No, there is no if, buts, and
I
ands
think there's
about it.
real confusion.
Right, and actually, I wasn't. One of the presenters, but I was on a call where people were talking about not quite the way you framed it, but it was close. And one segment had to do with apparently, I don't know if you've seen this. There's a group of black women they did their part.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
mean, that kind of
I've seen
craziness,
that.
as if voting for the Democrats is doing your part. You
Right. Right.
know.
Right. Right.
But, yeah, no, it's one of those things. If there was a straightforward and simple way to get at all of the contradictions, we just gotta deal with it. I don't know if there is a 100% answer to it, but recognize that there's segments of all of these populations that, um, are willing to fight for something that's
Mhm.
different. Yeah.
One good thing
Is
that
that your pet?
the MAGA people have taken this to kind of hyper racism that I would argue really does not leave a lot of room for darker people to find their way to their side. Increasingly, that should become less and less given the brutality,
Right.
right?
It's vulgar.
And the explicit, you know,
Right.
uh, the level in which they are very, very explicit
Right.
in their racism, their anti-black.
Well, you know what? Time will tell. We're gonna see how far how far this goes. I think the danger, of course, is that the violence that they're able to propagate
Yes,
against us in our community is very real.
yes.
I think there's a lot of overreach with this.
Hmm.
How far do they play their hand? Not that there isn't, we got 70 million votes, right?
Yeah.
But I don't, what
No, I don't believe he. I think that they're registering 70 million votes, but I'm not sure that 70 million
no,
people
that's
voted
where I was
for him.
going. We don't know what the internal dynamic of that is. We also know that 100 million people didn't vote at all.
Yeah,
So that's where our base is basically.
that's right.
So, but
Absolutely.
anyway, you were taking this someplace. I don't know if we
Yeah, I
we
was
took it
just trying to say. I was talking about strategically.
right,
How do we move some of these strands of
right,
real
right,
ideological confusion
right,
in
right,
our community?
right.
One that we should celebrate the fact that they're snatching up children and throwing them in the gulags, that these people are getting what they deserve because they betrayed us. Uh,
No, I mean that
this
that is yeah, no.
and
I always here's the sociologist to be what percentage are we talking about, and do they have an outside megaphone for these ideas? That goes back to what has always been our challenge is how deep into our base are we really?
mm,
How
mm,
do we who do I think there's a level at which, again, the visibility, the provocativeness of it, it gets a lot of attention.
that's right.
But one of the things that I do, I do a course in the community, and it's really interesting. These are oftentimes voices you don't hear, and they're not going to get any visibility. They don't spend a lot of time on Black Twitter. I guess Black Twitter still exists. I don't know. But people, they're thoughtful.
That's right.
And I don't know how much we as scholars and as researchers really plumb the depth of, our community, because so much of it is at the level of the visible. Uh, so that's one thing that doesn't completely resolve, uh, the point that you were making, because there is that's problematic. Uh, but the traditional answer is you do the political education. You work with people, and sometimes I was, again, back to this call I was on, one of the one of the elders was saying, y'all doing all this critique, but when did y'all become, how long did it take for y'all to become as radical as you are?
Hmm.
People have to grow and learn.
That's right.
And so, Professor, that if any of this stuff was all that straightforward and simple, we would have been free a long time
Absolutely.
ago.
Absolutely.
But I,
Absolutely.
I do hear you, and it does introduce another problematic in a time when we need to be as clear as we can about how we're going to take on this thing.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it's hard.
So, I mean, I know the answer to this, but I feel compelled to ask it. About a year ago, I had a Jamu Baraka of Black Alliance for Peace on, and he made a statement that you know how you can kind of know things intellectually,
Mm-hmm.
but effectively, emotionally, you have simply refused to accept the reality.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, we're not as radical as we were in the 60s, talking about black folk in general.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So my question is, in your opinion, has the black community moved rightward? I don't mean that we've become right wing. We're still the
Right,
most
right, 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 right.
progressive sector of U.S. society, but those things have limitations. And so his argument was that we're less radical, less progressive, less liberal than we
Mm-hmm.
were in the 60s. So can you respond to that? You know, as sociologists,
Yeah, I work with a JAMO and Black Alliance for Peace, and I've I've not heard that particular assessment, uh, but the idea that there is limousine left in the Black community is one that often is articulated. It sort of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, so-called public intellectual who, uh, you know, talks a big game, but you know, not much is happening there. Um, all of this stuff is so relative. Uh, I think he has a point. Um, I do know that in terms of that internationalism that used to characterize the Black left in this country
mhm,
has almost completely dissipated, you know. So in that sense, that's a problem.
yeah,
And not understanding that this is an imperialist nation is a
yeah,
problem. So there was seemingly more clarity about the nature of this system, not only internally but globally. If he's articulating that, I would agree. I would agree. So we've lost some of the tools of
mhm.
analysis. I don't know whether it's we can go back to who's getting hired in Black studies.
But absolutely
How
that
people are
and
being
beyond.
trained. Yeah.
You know, sometimes my students get mad at me, but I feel compelled to make the point to them that Kwame Ture was 24
Yeah,
when he
he was
shouted Black
young.
Power.
Right.
That H. Rap Brown Jamil Alameen was probably 26 or 27 when um,
Exactly.
when he published "Die Nigga Die," and that
Right.
if you go back to that moment in the 70s, those people who were putting out the seminal texts
Right.
were
Right.
in their mid 20s.
Right. Right.
And most of them were activists because
Right.
we hadn't breached the barriers of the
Exactly.
academy yet,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And so when I look at this moment, I ask the question, who are the theorists and
Mhm.
strategists, and where can you read what they've got to say? And I know some people say, well, it's on podcasts. Well,
That's not enough.
that clearly isn't enough because of the death, but also I would argue that the right side of the black movement, of the black liberation movement, meaning the Umar Johnsons and the people, the foundational Americans, they have a larger share of the African American, the black U.S. audience than we do.
Well, the other piece of that is, I mean, you have a podcast. I don't know what you have to do to build your audience.
Yeah,
That's part of it. And people are seduced by stupidity sometimes.
yeah,
I've heard this man, I've glimpsed him, but there's nothing about what he has to say that I want to listen to. But you're absolutely right. He has a particular kind of audience. Again, back to my earlier points, I don't know if he has the audience that is there, but it's not connected to anybody, really. To tell the truth,
Mm,
they're not. That's not where their head is. They're scrambling, trying to keep uh, bread on the table, a roof over their heads, etc. So I wonder sometimes, are we too seduced by the visibility piece of this? And what are the numbers?
yeah,
How do we carve this out in terms? To me, this is where oftentimes PhDs aren't good for too much, but
yeah,
show us the data. Give us
yeah,
some data
yeah,
here. Yeah.
yeah. It's it is frightening. There are some comments in the comment section.
Okay.
And as we're winding down, I try to be as close to the 90-minute time as possible.
Okay. Okay.
So let's turn there. But before we do you have any summatory comments or any announcements that you want to make before we go to the comments?
Yeah, I mean, you speaking of Kwame Ture, I think his words are as true now as they were then. Our task is to organize, organize,
Yes.
organize, and to reach that layer of our population that is not even in the conversation, and the political education that's going to take. I know for those of us who are in the academy, um, combining that work, difficult though it must be, is an imperative.
So I'm gonna start with the last. Thank you for that comment and for just coming on and providing us with those. What does the young people call them? Jewels of wisdom. So there's a comment here by UL Damas, and maybe there's something missing, but what it's more kind of comment question, and what is this: do you believe your brothers and sisters or your children or your parents or ancestors will ever be worth little pieces of paper? So UL Adamas, if you want to clarify that, put something in the chat, but contemplate that. I presume they're raising the question about
Commodification,
education,
value,
maybe.
right. I mean, I wish the the person who asked that might say a little bit more.
So they have a comment. They have a couple other comments, and
Okay.
one: capitalism is very quick to co-opt any type of movement and market
Right,
it
right,
to
right.
win. So that's where they're going.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the answer, maybe not obviously, but the commodification of our being, our soul, our very lives is what got us in this hellhole to begin with. And we as human beings, full human beings, the kind of world and society that I'm fighting to create is values our full humanity, not reducible to the buying and selling,
Mm.
whether that be 500 years ago or the current period, where I think you alluded to it, the modification of our culture, of our way of being, of who we are as um, as full humans. Uh, the person is quite right. As long as you have this kind of system, it can't be realizable, and definitely that's the kind of vision that I think we're fighting for.
So, and I agree wholeheartedly. I think that we have to be much more aggressive and assertive in saying that we seek the elimination of this current society.
Hmm.
it's not just Langston Hughes' problem. America has never been America to me.
It's more,
We
it's
don't
deeper
ever
than
want to
that. Right.
see the true
Exactly.
America, right?
Right.
It's not good for life on
No,
this
it's not.
planet.
It's not. It's not.
So there's another question here, and this is by Voidis Yang. And the question is, well, I guess this is the prosperity hustle getting
Oh,
mind controlled by Trump.
oh, you
That's
got it. Right.
the Christian, yeah, thing.
And what's the question?
That's what he said. The prosperity hustle getting mind controlled. So I guess he
Well, I
should
mean,
react to that.
prosperity, isn't that what capitalism is? Gangster
That's right. It's not
prosperity
just
hustle,
religion.
isn't that what it is? I mean, it was clothed in so-called liberal values that were never liberal, to tell the truth. And now, as you were saying earlier, the curtain has been pulled aside to some extent, and you can see fully any country that's going to put all its power in someone, and it's not just him. Like I don't want to fall into that trap. In a lot of ways, he's the face of all of the contradictions we were talking about before. This is a society that was founded on murder and genocide, and we're
Yeah.
still contending with this.
I will say this now. This might come off as lead some people to question my radicalism, but when I was younger, I thought that listening to people in Congress and reading, I thought that they were of a certain
You just froze.
caliber. I agree, but I thought that there was a level of intelligence, right? I never thought there was a level of goodness, but I thought that there was a level of intelligence. Trump is
You're freezing, but you're back.
okay. Trump is unintelligent. Well, he's uneducated and he's very the quality of people just seem to be horrific. Where before they were able to mask a little bit better, perhaps.
Yeah, and again, going back to what we were saying earlier, when a society is on the upside, moving up, uh, that's one kind of conjuncture, one kind of time, place, and condition. When a society is on this downward spiral, the worst of the worst emerges.
That's right.
And, you know, I'm afraid
And
that's what
that's
we're
what
dealing with. And
that's
back to your point, I mean, I don't think it has anything to do with your whether or not you're radical or not. I think all of us were socialized to believe a certain kind of thing
yeah.
about, I mean, whether you were in an all black school or I think you said you were in a Catholic school or
No, no, no,
wherever.
no. My mom worked for a Catholic. I was in public school.
Okay.
It was
Uh,
integrated. It was
right.
integrated. We were a minority. Yeah,
Right, but wherever you are, this is the pedagogy, and you spend time. Uh, I think um, you can see the contradictions. You may not have a strong sense of where they are, but I do think it's a heavy dose of propaganda that these are intelligent people and likely have
yeah,
never been.
yeah, yeah. So, Rose, I thank you immensely for coming on, and look forward to having you back as a guest again someday.
Well, I enjoyed it, even though we had a little bit of trouble trying to make it happen. It's good to see you again. It's been a minute since
It
I've been
has
in
been
the
a minute.
space with you. And I suspect we're going to be dealing with these issues for quite a while, don't you?
Yeah, it's clearly generational. But
Absolutely.
the one thing that I do know, we will win.
We will win.
We
We
will
will.
win.
If what else can you assert? Otherwise, you just throw it away. You throw in the towel. Can't do that.
No,
Not after 500 years.
that's right.
Not after the Middle Passage. And we here.
Hey, hey.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Okay, take care.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
Bye bye.
Bye.
I guess you.